Hi, I'm Eliana Scarborough and welcome to my CCR Task 1 project where I will be speaking about my opening title sequence, The Note, and giving more detail about my thoughts behind my creation, and I will be answering the question of how does your product use or challenge conventions and how does it represent social groups or issues? The genre of our film, The Note, was a dark comedy. This is due to the combination of slapstick humorous events that we combined with light-hearted pain and consequence. So what are genre conventions? These are the themes, characters, tropes and traits and situations that basically make certain stories the genre that they are. To ensure we had both elements of this contrasting genre combination, we had to include an underscore of comedic music and ensure the pace was fast to reduce attachment to the characters and show their significance. Now I will be comparing The Note to similar films of this genre. These will include Shaun of the Dead, Trolleyed, Hot Fuzz and End of the Effing World. So first up, we have Shaun of the Dead. It was released in 2004 and produced by Studio Canal along with working title film and was directed by Edgar Wright. This was a part of the Cornetto trilogy, including two other films called Hot Fuzz and The World's End. The second is Trolleyed, which first aired in 2011. It was produced by Rough Cut TV and the show's creator is Paul Dolan along with co-creator Ash Atala. I will also be comparing to Hot Fuzz, the second film in the Cornetto trilogy. It was released in 2007 and directed again by Edgar Wright and starred in by Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. It was produced by Studio Canal also along with working title film. My final comparison is the show End of the Effing World, a TV series that premiered in 2017. It was produced by Clerkwell Films and Dominic Buchanan Productions and directed by Jonathan Entelwise and Lucy. I'm going to start off by looking at the similarities of editing between Shaun of the Dead and my piece, The Note. So, the first significant feature is the smash cutting. This is where there are sudden, rapid cuts after an action for dramatic effect. We see this early in the film Shaun of the Dead, where Shaun does his morning routine, but it's cut together in an interesting way. This compares to a scene later in my opening title sequence where Adam, our homeless man, is surprisingly punched in the face by two teens. The camera quickly cuts to the boy's reaction, and it doesn't show the effect of the homeless man keeping the curiosity and a comedic effect. Another editing feature that is prominent in both pieces is the quick cut montages. These are sequences of close-up shots that tend to show actions in a more dramatic way. We decided to use this technique in our piece due to the comedy of our piece from sudden crazy actions between ordinary ones. Within Shaun of the Dead, there is a scene where they are describing the plan, that they have to terminate zombies, and there's a quick cut action sequence showing the scenes that they're doing and what they're imagining. We decided to use this quick cut method to build anticipation and to show the process of paying through past fast-paced edits before the reaction shot of the shopkeeper. Overall, fast-paced editing and clever cutting techniques are a prominent feature, particularly in the comedic genre. Next, I will be doing the comparison of sound, where I will compare both diegetic and non-diegetic features. I will be comparing End of the Effing World to my sequence, again, The Note. So, the first prominent feature of Dianetic sound that stood out to me was the loud explosion of the car as James and Alyssa turned away. This creates a slapstick comedy effect due to the conversation beforehand consisting of James saying how he can fix it. The sudden irony of the explosion allows the comedy to overpower the fear.
We have to fix it, we can't just leave it here.
Do you reckon you can still fix it?
Similarly, within The Note, there is an instance where a line prior has an ironic effect on the terrible action followed, straight after through the sound. This is when the shopkeeper says to the musical grandma, £10 please love, and immediately after we hear the car crash and the scream of her running over. These elements of diegetic sound are significant as they create a contrast to the low level of spoken volume. They provide a surprise of volume, creating a comedic atmosphere. Non-diegetically, End of the Effing World has a very interesting soundtrack. One of the songs that appears significantly in the first episode is Laughing on the Outside, Crying on the Inside, which was originally released by Dinah Shore, but in this version it is performed by Bernadette Carrell.
Laughing on the outside, crying on the inside.
Similarly, when deciding on background music for The Note, we found a YouTube music video called Sneaky and Mischievous. We liked the Charlie Chaplin retro vibe it had going on and felt it would pair well with the type of comedy in our piece, as it's quite slapstick but still dark. I decided to use this comparison as they both have the same vibe of contrapuntal sound, either through the calmness of End of the Effing World scene or through the humorous lightheartedness of The Note. I will next be talking about the camera similarities through angles and composition between Hot Fuzz and, obviously, again, The Note. The first camera work similarity is the dynamic camera movements. This film features very energetic shots, including handheld shots, whip pans, and this adds to the intensity of the comedy and builds the messy energy before the action happens. This is similar to a moment in The Note where the grandma is introduced and there is a whip pan onto the reveal of her face. We did this to show a comedic effect and emphasise the character reveal. I felt that these moments were similar as they both show intense camera movement to heighten a moment, also accompanied by a noise to emphasise the humour of the pan. The handheld camera work also adds a sense of realism and urgency. Another moment in The Note where the camera work is similar to Hot Fuzz is when the grandma has been run over and the note is blown out into the shot of the homeless man scene. This features a low camera angle with the camera handheld on the floor, adding to a variety of shot dimensions. Similarly, in Hot Fuzz, there is a moment in the opening scene where there is a low tracking shot angle of Nicholas Angel walking. This adds interest and builds tension. These interesting shot types are significant to the comedic side of the genre as they create a naturalistic comedic element. Finally, I will be discussing the similarities of mise-en-scène between the TV show Trolleyed and, again, The Note. The first notable mise-en-scène feature in Trolleyed that is similar to my film is the utilisation of high-key lighting effects, which creates an optimistic atmosphere overall underlying the satire show. Similarly, The Note has this style of bright lighting, particularly due to the shop setting, but also when the camera is outside. It has white tones indicating happiness, which is contrasted and creates an element of surprise when the incidents take place. This feature appears the same to me in both segments, as it has a comedic brightness to it that again creates a humorous contrast to either the dialogue or actions within the scene. Another feature of mise-en-scène is the stereotypical conventions of the shop uniform. We see Ali, our shopkeeper, in a black zip-up with a name tag, and also the typical grandma costume in the opening of her appearance. This also creates a stereotypical comedic effect. Similarly, this is shown through the main butcherman, Andy, in Trolleyed, who is typically large and wears a red striped apron, stereotypical of his job. It adds a comedic effect also through his character's exaggerated storytelling and lies. He has a wise yet insecure demeanour which engages the audience. Overall, the mise-en-scène plays a significant role in my genre as it creates the atmosphere and mood for the audience to engage with and find the comedy within often taboo matters.
I will now be talking about the conventions of an opening title sequence and be considering the character introduction, narrative, and titles. The film I have picked to compare it to is Shaun of the Dead. First, let's look at the character introduction. A minute into the sequence, we are met with Shaun, the main character we can assume from the long shot duration on his presence and the camera tilting to reveal his yawning face. He walks at the beginning of the scene in a zombie-like way, again hinting at the plot of the movie. He gives the vibes of a bit of a doormat due to his hungover state, which foreshadows his character where he goes into his boring job later in the film. Also, prior to this, we are shown a pan of clips of a typical mundane people doing their jobs, highlighting the boredom of the working day and subtly hinting at human nature resembling zombies, which is essentially what the film is about. The characters in this section are simply represented as tired, boring, and uninterested, operating as if they're dead and appearing zombie-like. The sequence establishes a comedic and relatable setup for the narrative. It introduces his life and the mundane nature of his routine. Furthermore, the lack of excitement he has in his life. It also gives an overall vibe of the demographics, a typical early 2000s working class English vibe. The mundane nature of this is essential to provide the humour later on in the zombie outbreak. The movement within the sequence creates a slow and endless feel, like the jobs that the people are doing, the idea that they're dragging on forever. The slow pace also hints at the narrative of the zombies and their slow movement.
Finally, I will be analysing the titles and I will be looking at their font, colour and placement. So, the font used in the sequence is a bold sans serif, which makes it easily readable but also reflects the mundane action in the background. The colour of the font is white with a black outline. However, spikes of black are thrown in throughout, creating a rustic zombie-like element. The transitions are simple fade in and fade out, allowing the action behind to shine without being overshadowed by any other effects. An interesting placement for the title of the actual film is on the floor in the alleyway, as the zombie-like teenagers walk in unison. This blend and centralised text makes the text the focal point and draws the audience's attention towards the film title. The overall colour, font and movement creates an appropriate aesthetic that serves both the horror and comedic aspects of the film, which sets the scene well for what's to come. In accompany to all this, during the title sequence, a rather interesting blend of electronic rock creates a modern and comedic soundscape. This music is by the band Goblin, and the track is called Zombie. They are also known for lots of work on various horror film scores, which adds an iconic sound to the sequence. It also complements the urban setting and contemporary storyline. Electric guitars are also prominent, giving an overall lively feel, which contrasts the actions taking place. I will now be returning to the note, where I'll be looking at what conventions are challenged by my sequence. The first is subject matters. If we look at all the themes of the note, due to the nature of its genre, it looks at topics that are typically serious or unsettling, such as death or pain, shown through the grandma getting hit. However, it makes light of them through its CESM features, which promotes laughter. Moral boundaries are also challenged through our sequence, through our use of playing with moral ethics. The idea of robbing the note off people allows us to challenge audiences so they can reflect on societal norms as well as personal values. Finally, we challenged emotional response. The audience may feel a range of emotions provoked, maybe even simultaneously. For instance, when the homeless man is punched, this shock will create initial humour, but maybe a sense of sympathy as the teens walk off unbothered. I will now be looking at what social groups/issues are presented within the note. The first social group representation is youth and teen culture. We played on the stereotypical teen boys by using two 17-year-olds to play our rowdy teen friends. They give the sense of carefree, unsympathetic boys who encourage each other to do bad things in order to show off. Therefore, they fit well into our comedy and are easily identifiable through their typical dark jogger vibe costumes and big puffy coats. Also, the culture of young teens in suburban areas connected with minor theft, shown through the boys stuffing his puffy coat in the opening sequence. We showed this to set the locational tone right at the beginning. This contrasts our character of the grandma, who represents the generational gap. Her age has brought her misery, whereas the kids are energetic and happy. However, she ends up suffering death due to the curse of the note. We placed her in this miserable light through close-up face shots, really establishing her angry emotion, therefore to add to the comedy of her death. So, the audience would find humour in her before the sudden incident. Finally, we see the representation of ethnic culture and identity shown through our shopkeeper. This also showcases how different ethnic groups contribute to the community, which overall increases multiculturalism. His character serves as the community backbone, as he is the character in our sequence with the most dialogue in the shop. This hints at his significance, perhaps in the rest of the film. He also is mainly seen at the same angle, and he looks onto the customers, as well as his long shot duration as he chases the robber out the shop. The grandma and the boys contrast can apply to Levi Strauss's binary opposition theory, the idea of the youth versus the elderly and their stereotypical extreme contrast. However, the significance in our comedy is that they're connected through the note. Also, we can apply the theory of gender performativity by Judith Butler. The action that the teen boys take by punching the man further establishes their gender and its identity that's constructed to them through repeated societal actions. The idea that their actions make them male, not necessarily them. I will finally be looking at the stereotypes and countertypes represented through my social groups. Due to the nature of the dark comedy genre, stereotypes are important to ensure light-hearted comedy can be established. Therefore, through the grandma, the shopkeeper, and the teens, I decided to adhere to the typical stereotypical features of these characters. Otherwise, subverting may evoke too much thought about the significance of them, when the comedy comes from their injuries and removal from the scene. Thanks for listening.